Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about audio. We're going to dive into our audio system and talk about ways to trigger different audio files and set volume levels for a mixer, as well as ways to kind of fade certain clips in and out. So we're going to start. We'll bring this down a little bit. We're going to look at the zone-based audio triggering system. We looked at the zone tracker before. And so the way a lot of these sounds are being triggered is that when you go into a certain zone, different files are turned on, and then we've got different volumes for each of those. So the way I kind of arranged it, I have different kind of families of sounds. We're going to mostly look at this Breathing Rocks family, where I have 4 different audio files. It's called Breathing Rocks 1, 2, 3, 4. And depending on what zone I'm in, I want to trigger file 1, 2, 3, or 4 here. So I have this written down right here. So it's kind of corresponding to which zone I'm in. And then for the mix column, I have a final math chop. It's basically doing a kind of a gain as that group kind of goes out before it mixes with all the other sounds. So even though I might keep the same sounds, maybe the volume might change or do different things. So I found it nice to just have a table like this as a preset to keep track of all those values. So this was filled in manually, and then that is propagated to. So that we're inside the Breathing Rocks container here. So this I'm getting what zone I'm in currently. So I'm in zone B, and then the select dat. So it's grabbing that row and the column for Breathing Rocks, and then I've written manually the numbers 1, 2, 3, or 4 there. So this has the number 1 in it. So then that will go to a dat execute, and with this little string concatenation, I'm getting the value of 1. Therefore, it looks for a button 1 inside this. These are actually the old style of buttons because I did this before the newer text comp. So then it clicks button 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then the radio propagates to my logics here. So I guess the reason why I often like to do this type of system with, I didn't really need these buttons here. I could have gone straight from this dat execute and clicked something or changed a value somewhere. But this also enables me to do things manually. If I want to debug, or in times like now, I can just click that manually. So maybe let me bring this over here so I can click it a little bit more easily. Make that a little bit bigger. And so we can see I have this kind of triggers going. So let's bring this up again. So that's number 2. So these are all fairly similar, but subtle variations. 3. So that fades out, this fades in. And then 4. Okay, so we'll just turn that off. So this fading system, this adds a little complexity that I wanted. I didn't want things to just start and stop with hard edges, right? I wanted everything to kind of slowly fade in, fade out. So let's take a look at how that's happening. So the radio buttons, coming out of this group, we get numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? So that's the way radio buttons work. But I have some me.digits stuff happening here. So I really wanted the numbers 1 through 4 instead of 0 through 3. So this math is just adding 1 more. These logic chops are set to off with outside bounds, so and they're set to look for me.digits. So this is looking for the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. We can see right now, so number 4 is coming in here, so this one has been activated. But for fading, if we think about it in a certain way, so because this logic is essentially connected to this play toggle on and off, and then the trigger is doing the fading on this multiply that comes afterwards. So when we're turning something on first I want play to go to on, and then I want trigger to fade up. When I'm turning it off, I want the trigger to fade down and then play to go to off, right? So the sequence is different depending on if we're turning on or turning off. And so to account for that difference, I have this lag chop here. So when the value is rising in my lag, there's a 0 second lag. So this will go immediately from 0 to 1. But when I'm turning it off, it'll take 5 seconds to go from 1 back to 0. So that slows down this logic here because it's got an off and outside bounds. So it's going to be on if it's between 0.05 and 1. And that ultimately is what's referencing this play toggle on or off here. So we can see, if I bring this back over here, and I'll just click until we see button 3. So as that fades down, this is still on. When the lag goes below 0.05, that finally turns off. Voila. While that was lagging, the logic 0 went directly to trigger, and we could see our release is 5 seconds. So that went ahead and started fading out. This attack is also 5 seconds. So that handles the envelope of bringing it in and out. As you click something else, the opposite happens, right? So this trigger immediately, the attack goes 5 seconds up. So I found that to be a helpful little system, and this is something that I use in a talks a lot, which this talks will be available on the TouchDesigner community site also. So you can look up if you want to try that out also. So let's look at a simplified version and maybe show like why exactly we had to go to that trouble. If I go back out here, and let's turn this one off, and let's dive into simplified version here. Okay, there we go, got it. So here we can see a version without any fading. And all I'm doing is connecting my logic to the play on or off. And let's have a listen. It's a very hard edge there. And there's also a little click. Maybe, I'm not sure if it picked up in the recording, but there's a tiny little pop because these are starting and stopping in a really harsh way. There's this little toggle here, fade in out, that we could do that for all of these. But you might also notice if we look at the wiki here. Actually, I think I already had it open. There we go. This is the audiophile in chop wiki page. So it talks about the different parameters. It doesn't have a little line about that fade in and out. But you don't have any control over the duration of that. But really what it's doing, it's meant to avoid that click. So it's doing, I'm not sure how many samples it is, but it's not going directly from 0 to 1, right? It's having some little curve. But it still doesn't give us control over a nice long fade. So why do I need to do this play on and off? So I could also imagine a world where maybe I've got this logic and I've got a lag and I just leave the play on all the time, and maybe that's the lag coming from the logic is just hooked up to the volume here, and so that would kind of do like a fade in and out also. And it comes down to, I mean, there's really no correct answer. Knowing that I was going to have lots and lots and lots of these audiophile in chops, I think I have almost 50 of them in my whole system. So I was really shooting for a really optimized system and trying to really shave off little tiny milliseconds, fractions of a millisecond wherever I could. So to kind of show the difference, and this is getting a little bit pedantic. It's really tiny little values, but they do add up. With this file here, what I'm doing is I've hooked up to an info chop, and just with my info, I just selected the cook time channel of info. And so I want to see how, so this is playing right now, its volume's on. I can kind of see it's, cook time is pretty short, but it's, 0.03 something, 0.04. Because this is really spiky when I'm actually doing beyond this trail. I'm hooking up to an analyze average and then another trail. And actually, let's do a little vertical adapt. Can I see that? It's quite a small value, but we can see, okay, so on average, let's say it's around 0.04 just for the sake of clarity. Okay, so what if I turn that off? Okay, so I turn it off. Oh, look, that actually went down quite a lot. Now I'm at like 0.026, so I'm about do the math. 0.014 milliseconds less than I was before, just by lieu of the fact that I turned play off. So it's like, okay, that's such a tiny little amount, but you multiply that by 50, then we're talking some actually substantive amount of time. If we think about, I have almost 6,000 operators in this project. I would like to get 60 frames a second if I could, which means I'm really shooting for total 16 milliseconds for my total frame time, and divided by 6,000 operators, then that becomes a pretty low amount of time that I want each individual operator to take, right? So if I can shave off little tiny chunks of time like that, then that's what I want to do. So that's just something, maybe it matters for your project, maybe it doesn't, but I think it's always nice to just be aware of that, and do a little test. So hook up an info chop, get a trail, just have a look at the cook time, do some variations and see if does it really matter. Is it worth it to create a little more complex system? I used a few extra operators to do this fading thing, so that adds a few extra milliseconds also. But really, it's ultimately the experience is what matters. So if the experience is good, then we're great. Also to show why am I doing it in this way where I have audio file in chops all over the place, which I'm just playing pre-recorded wave files that I recorded previously. So I created all of these sounds. Why not do a more live thing? Now we have this audio VST chop. TouchDesigner plays really well with Ableton Live or other DAWs. That also is a really cool option. However, let's just see what's happening here. Oh no, am I going to crash? Okay, great, no crash. Thought the VST was gonna crash me for a second. So what I have going here is, let's just hook this up to the sound and turn that back on. Okay, got a little something different. This is a VCV rack patch. So most of the sounds in this project I made with lots of different VCV rack patches. So this is generating the sound right now in real time, and we can see the waveforms happening there. But what if I hook this up to my info, and lo and behold, oh no, that's like drastically different. If I see that, so this audio VST chop right now is taking like 7 milliseconds just by itself. So obviously that's not doable for any type of system where it's really huge and there's lots of different things happening, because it takes up almost half the frame time that I want just by itself. So a little bit selfish. So depending on your project, again, like maybe it's fine, but anything for a larger project, you really have to be aware of optimization methods. So let's just get rid of that. Okay, let's go back up. Okay, so that's looking at some of the fading, the triggering, optimization, and let's look at the mixer thing here. So this mixer also, I could have gotten away with not having this. I have the mix values here. So let's say, depending on what zone I'm in, the breathing rocks mix, I've got values right here of what I want. Ultimately, it's going to this math at the end of my, actually, there we go. So that's the actual value that I'm supposed to have right now. So this is getting that value from my table. So why am I going from the table to this container, from the container to my math chop? I'm also kind of adding an extra little step there. And it really, for me, it just became, I liked having this UI, so I can see at a glance what different sound families, how the mix is. I found it really helpful as I was playing around with this, that I could very easily kind of click this and drag these up and down to kind of get a sense for the mix of what needs to go up and down. And then I kind of just stuck with it after that. Because really what's happening here, I'm grabbing that table, basically grabbing the values, and then converting it to a chop. So I've got all my different columns for my mix, and then the filter is very slowly kind of filtering through these depending on what zone I'm in. So we can see what happens. Actually, let's do this. Let me do a manual. Let's turn this on so we can hear. And I just have the breathing rocks thing happening here so I don't confuse things too much. In my zone tracking, let's float this. And let's see what happens if I click a different zone. So I add new zones, we can see breathing rocks mix is changing. This is also an example of my debugging for my zone tracking. Usually it's depending on your camera position, but in this case I switched to manual so I can just manually come through here. So I found it useful to have this UI so I can confirm that my fadings and my mix is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Okay, cool. So maybe that's good for audio. It's really just at the end of it, I've got all these different containers. Math is setting the individual gain for each. I'm combining all of them together with just an add, combine chops add, which just one thing to keep in mind for that. If all of your files are already pretty loud, when you add them all together, then very easily you're going to get to a kind of clipping distortion type of thing. So that's why a lot of these, most of the mixes are very, very low values to make sure that when I bring them together, it's not just a huge muddy mess. And then sometimes I've got master gain, depending on demo mode, which will be the topic of another video, and then going out. Okay, cool. So hopefully that's helpful.